the Scale AI report just came out, State of AI report 2025. And I think one of their predictions was we'll see $1 billion unicorn with one employee. That is one person who has AI agents doing all this work. Maybe we'll get that, maybe we won't, but there's a lesson there about your thing to scale now is going to be a machine if you do it right.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gao, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is Sheldon Fernandez. His title isn't just CEO or founder. It's AI strategist, thinker, and philosopher. He describes himself as an abiding Renaissance man in an area of specialization, and his background proves it. He has a degree in computer engineering, but also a master's in theology and philosophy, and he studied creative writing at Oxford University. He put that unique blend into practice, co-founding a successful software firm where he was the CTO for 16 years before taking the helm as CEO of the AI company Darwin AI. He now advises companies on AI governance, ethics, and even artificial consciousness. For any CEO who wants to think more deeply about scaling not just their company, but their own leadership in the age of AI, this conversation is for you. Sheldon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Glenn. Excited to be here.
You call yourself a Renaissance man in the area of specialization.
Yes.
Now, most CEOs are told to focus relentlessly. So how does your deep background in philosophy and theology make you a better business leader? And how does that broad perspective help you scale in the age of AI?
Yeah, great question. I can think of a few areas in which having a multidisciplinary background was really useful. Early in Darwin's kind of tenure, we, for example, had an investor in Lockheed Martin, the defense contractor. And this was in 2017, 2018. And we had academics on the team that were uneasy taking, venture money from a defense contractor. And so a lot of the ethical kind of work that I'd done as a part of my master's degree really helped me sharpen the framework by which we articulated to our team why we were comfortable doing this, what our boundaries were, what our ethical kind of rubric at the company was. And so even though, yes, as a founder, you have to focus, I think one of the things I was able to do because of my background is have a broader lens to evaluate where I should focus. I did my master's in theology, as you mentioned. My thesis was in neuroscience and metaethics. I did it purely out of curiosity, not knowing that the neuroscientific element of it would relate to neural networks, which is, of course, why we're all here with deep learning.
Right.
And then the metaethical component, again, informed a lot of the morality and ethical decisions when we ran Darwin. So it was a fascinating interdisciplinary application that way.
It's really fascinating to me. And people talk about bias in AI. And what I believe is that there is bias in human behavior. And yet now, because there's noticeable bias in AI, we have a spotlight on bias.
Yeah.
And what I believe is that's going to help us become a less biased set of people, if you will, in when we make our decisions because of the spotlight that's on it, because it's always been there before, and AI is going to help us actually limit the amount of bias. What do you think about that?
I think there's a lot of merit to that argument. One of the things we've learned is AI, if anything, reveals to us about our own human tendencies that
Right.
we were blind to before.
Right.
So as an example, early in the days of the pandemic, Darwin AI actually became famous because within 2 weeks of the pandemic becoming a thing here in Ontario and the province closing, we released a neural network called COVIDNet that diagnosed corona based on chest x-rays and CT scans. And we open sourced it to the community. It didn't feel right to us, and maybe this is the Canadian in us, Glenn, to profit off technology at a time of global emergency. So we released it out into the wild, but we found, it was repurposed in different ways in different geographies. And we trained it primarily on COVID x-rays we had from a, North American data set. And when they tried to repurpose it in India and China, we got wildly disparate results.
Mm,
And so we had to really pay attention to data quality in that situation, right? So
got
this was really a thing early in the days of neural networks and looking at insights, and it became a real pronounced thing for us in the early days of the pandemic. Interestingly,
That's great. That's a great example. Now, let's talk about you for a moment. You were a CEO for 16 or CTO for
yes,
16 years
yeah,
before you stepped into the CEO role at Darwin AI. And that's a massive, what I call a personal scaling journey.
yeah.
Looking back at that transition, what did you learn about yourself so you could scale into that CEO role and eventually help sell the company?
Right. I often recount this conversation. In the early days of Darwin, I was sitting down with our chief scientist, and Darwin wasn't even a thing. We just existed on paper, but we didn't have a team or funding. And the chief scientist, who was one of the founders, Professor Alexander Wong, he's Canada's research chair in AI, he said, Sheldon, like, we're starting this. Do you want to be the CTO? And I said, Alex, like, normally I'd be a CTO, but I'm the least technical person here, and that's saying something. And he's like, "Well, what are you then?" And I paused for a moment, Glenn, and it's one of those inflection points, I think, in life where you just feel that you're at a point where the holistic experience you have is set for the next journey. And I said, "Well, I'm your CEO. I'm running this." And I never had ambitions of being a CEO prior to the age of, late 30s. But it just felt like I loved the technology. I was with a group of really exceptional academics, and I had gained enough peripheral exposure to the executive world of running the business to be confident that I could do it. And so it was that confluence of experience and timing that was just really appropriate. And I think what I learned, Glenn, is I had a newfound respect for my CEO when I was the CEO asking the CTO for impossible demands. I got, the delegation to technology in a way that I didn't appreciate before.
That's really great. And in my experience, CEOs, especially of startup companies, don't last very long. In fact, roughly 60% of them get fired within a 5-year period.
Yeah,
And the primary reason is the CEO brings with them a certain set of skills, which are fantastic in the moment, but they need to expand those skills. They need to scale themselves personally. And
yeah,
those CEOs who do scale themselves succeed. And those who stick to only what they're good at
yeah.
find themselves just not being able to succeed in that role.
I remember my former CEO had a saying. He said, that which makes you good will keep you from being great.
Aha.
And, what he meant by that was when you're really exceptional at a narrow task, the tendency is to lean on that task and not scale yourself or kind of grow into those areas of discomfort that are necessary for, a role like this. And I was always a good, strong public speaker. I was always a good technologist, but I had to learn about managing a board and operational detail that was not my forte. And I didn't have to be exceptional at it, but I had to be good enough to enable all the other parts of my profession, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic. So let's talk about giving some practical advice now to some of our listeners
yeah,
and given your expertise in AI. So for CEOs, let me tell you what I've been saying, and then I want you to either adjust what I've said or add on to what I say to CEOs. Number one, that they should be thinking about how to operationalize their company using AI. In other words, leverage all the tools that are available to them, whether they're large language models or they're tools embedded in existing software. That's number one. Number two, that they should probably do that first and foremost in software development, if they're a software development company, because that's where the greatest gains are happening right now. And then third is to incorporate that in their product or their product offering and ask, how can we leverage what we have, the assets we have, whether it's data or access to information that will enable us to provide a better solution. What is your advice to CEOs about how to think about AI right now?
it's not dissimilar from what you just said. We're finding a lot of the benefit technologically with AI from a development perspective is really with agile organizations that
Hmm.
can adapt quickly. I do advisory for both startups and large enterprises, and large enterprises are burdened with processes and a lot of heavy, you know, occupational operational things that make it difficult to, unhesitatingly embrace AI. So
Right.
you have an advantage as a startup to doing that and really figuring it out. One of the learnings that I've had, advising and consulting is when AI is used in a disruptive or transformative way, it's not just a technological add-on to an existing process. It necessitates reimagining that process in a given domain. That's
Mm.
that's what we're seeing, right? And so to the CEOs who are looking, hey, where can I apply AI? Where is there a real opportunity in the marketplace? One of the qualifiers I would have to a big hard problem, that could be lucrative is, am I reinventing a process in some way? That really accelerates, the application of AI in this domain? And if the answer to that is yes, and the industry is open to that, right? It may be a disruptive element to what you're doing. I think there's real opportunity there.
That's a great way to think about it. I've heard the analogy that in the earliest days of the internet, say magazines just put their magazine on the internet, right? They
Right,
just plopped it. There was no business model change. There was no workflow change. There was no
right.
literally no change except to publish differently. And
Yeah,
yet everything after that about content consumption changed. And
right.
so to support your point, I think what you're saying is, can we do things differently or better or completely different things that we haven't done before because we have AI available to us?
Absolutely. And that's the exciting thing about it, right? It's this radically powerful technology. And there's all these markets that are, they have incumbents who have ossified their way of thinking. And therein lies the opportunity for an agile, nimble startup to say, what if we did it this? What if we flipped it on its head and did X? Now, that won't always work. And that's why you got to experiment. But it sometimes will work. And when it sometimes works, it can be quite amazing, right? I mean, Uber is the example I often give, right? When Jobs have held up the iPhone, nobody connected the inefficiency of taxi service with GPS and the fact that you had a smart computer in your hand, right?
Right.
And it's an obvious connection, but one that they made, and look what we have today.
Beautiful. Now, you've written about dark AI and the promise of explainability. So tell us more about that, especially for the CEOs and board members in the audience.
You will often hear, and this is still the case, that AI is incredible, but it is a mystery even to its designers. And that is because it is so probabilistic and based on these deep language models that have billions of parameters, even the people designing it do not necessarily understand how it came up to a given conclusion, right? When ChatGPT gives you this precise output, what was it about your sequence of inputs, the memory context, even the floating point and arithmetic on the machine that resulted in this exact output? So explainability is our lack of kind of transparency into the workings of the machinery of deep learning. And for certain regulated industries, I'm thinking financial services, I'm thinking healthcare, they demand a certain level of understanding and traceability. And so therein lies a bit of a technical opportunity for those companies that are willing to kind of, crack it.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Because we need to understand for some answers, how did you get there? So we can question that thinking pathway.
Yeah. And the example I used to give in the early days of Darwin, this is when autonomous vehicles were all the rage. We had a client that ran into a very strange situation where their self-driving car would turn left with increasing statistical frequency when the color of the sky was a certain shade of purple,
Oh my
right?
god.
Let me repeat that, right? So say the sky is purple, this car starts turning left. And they had no idea why this was happening because it was a deep learning neural network that was doing this. We used our explainability IP and helped them figure out that they had done the training for this turning scenario in the Nevada desert at a particular time of day every day when the color of the sky was that shade of purple.
Wow.
And so we use this as an example because this is what we call a nonsensical correlation. It's a correlation found in the data that doesn't map to what you would expect in the real world. And if you don't know how something works, you don't know when it'll fail. And if you don't know when it'll fail, there are boundary cases, edge cases like this lurking in the system that can manifest with disastrous consequences.
Wow, wow, wow. That's a powerful
Yeah.
tool. So as we wrap up here, you now advise companies on AI strategy and explore topics like artificial consciousness.
Yeah.
So as AI is evolves from a simple tool to a potential creative partner, how does that change the very definition of scaling a company? What does it mean to be a scaling CEO when your most scalable employee is actually a neural network?
Yes. And the whole challenge we're running into and what we're learning with this mysterious new technology is that it shifts where critical thinking happens. So it used to be the critical thinking would happen when I did the actual task, when I wrote the report, when I tried to balance the spreadsheet, whatever it was. We're learning now the critical thinking goes into the prompt, how you kind of set up the AI, how you lucidly write its instructions, and then what you do with the output is the second facet of that critical thinking. So for CEOs, the scaling opportunity is you have something before you that in a given domain can scale with compute, right? I sometimes ask my companies, if you had access to an analyst 24/7 with, mathematical PhD like level reasoning, what would that analyst be doing? And that gets them thinking right away. What would they be doing? I would ask the same question to your CEOs. If they had at their disposal a junior analyst that could run through calculations thousands of times faster than a human being, but needed to be taught a lot. But when it was taught, could produce good results in a narrow domain. What would they be doing for you? And so CEOs that ask themselves that question and can situate that in the context of the critical prompting and the critical outputs really have a scaling opportunity in front of them. I think the Scale AI report just came out, State of AI report 2025, and I think one of their predictions was we'll see $1 billion unicorn with one employee. That is
Ah,
one person
right.
who has AI agents doing all this work. Maybe we'll get that, maybe we won't, but there's a lesson there about your thing to scale now is going to be a machine if you do it right.
That's just amazing. And some of the advice I give to CEOs, if they're going to be using a large language model, is become really great at prompting, but then ask for that large language model to build a better prompt for you.
Yeah,
And it might take you, for a serious question, a half hour to actually build a significantly useful prompt. And then
yeah,
I have two large language models compete against each other,
yeah,
running the same prompt, and then I get two different long answers. Let's say it's a research study.
yeah.
And then I ask them to bring that study together and evaluate the answers. So I'm really relying on these two PhDs, if you will, to get work done for me because I can't always trust just one of them.
I think that's entirely fair. And the irony is, we thought large language models would make writing obsolete. What we've learned is that it most benefits those of us who can write really well
That's
and
a really
clearly
great
and
point.
crisply and lucidly. So that's the irony for those of you who also become good writers, because that'll make you be able to converse with your LLM more effectively.
Fantastic. Sheldon, we are all done. Thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate the very, very interesting things you've covered for us today. So tell the audience how they might be able to reach you.
LinkedIn is probably the best example, the best contact. You can just add me. You'll find me. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Go Jays! My Blue Jays team is in tough situation right now, but we're still rooting for them. They can also find me at Twitter, Sheldon FFF, three Fs.
Fantastic. Sheldon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.